We are live.
Okay. Well, good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us for our Tuesday night panel processing. And I apologize to everyone out there that had frustration trying to hear what was going on here from the ranch here Sunday morning. We did have computer issues, and we finally decided that it was time for a new computer. So that's ordered, and hopefully by next Sunday that will be up and running. So again, I apologize, and the panel mostly didn't get to hear the message, so it's hard for them to comment on something they didn't hear. Although I'm fully confident that each of them has a good knowledge of this subject matter in Romans 7. So I opened up a study of Romans 7, and we went through the first 6 verses. So I'll briefly review that for you. So, starting out in verse 1, it says, Know ye not, brethren, for I speak to them that know the law, how the law has dominion over a man as long as he liveth. So, right then, I paused to talk a little bit about the law, not just God's law and commandments, but all the law that we live with and that we've grown up with, starting with when we're infants, the law of the home. And how do you learn to relate to your family of origin or the home that you grow up in? And it starts really in the first year of life. And then also what I observed is what I called the law of Avery. That's my granddaughter that's 10 months old, who we watch 5 days a week. Hey, Martin.
Hey
And
guys.
hey, I'm just kicking off because the sound trouble that we had with the audio at the church Sunday. So I figured I'd get kind of review that since you guys didn't really have an opportunity to listen to it.
Appreciate
So,
that, mate.
so I mentioned, we got Avery's law, and she's already starting to rebel against the law of the home, the law of the household. I mean, so it happens really early, and it occurred to me, and I'll throw this up for you guys to maybe bat around, is that I think it's interesting that we we naturally rebel against the law, no matter which law you're talking about or which set of laws. But at the same time, we're uncomfortable without it. You take the law away, and we freak out. And that's what a lot of people are struggling with when we go into these verses. Is like, what do you mean there's no law? How are we going to prevent chaos and anarchy? So we have to go through and talk about that, but we struggle with it and without it. It's interesting the way we're made, the way the mind of our flesh works. So we talked about that, and we talked about going on into preschool and kindergarten, how we start learning the rules and the laws of socialization. You have to learn to wait your turn and raise your hand if you want to speak or get permission to go to the bathroom and all these types of things. And then we talked about going on into the elementary school and then in middle school, where we're really bombarded with peer group law. And it's all about, what does it take to fit in? What does it take to be okay? Yeah. And then we go on into the years when you're learning to drive, you start learning about civil law. And I made the comment that, if you were the only driver on the highway, there would be no need for traffic signs or turn signals or speed limits or any of these things. But to protect everyone else on the highway, the integrity of that system, there has to be a set of laws. And then it talked about, civil laws that we're bound by as adults when we reach adulthood, and the consequences of violating those laws. And then finally, along the way, we're introduced to God's law and the commandments. We have the 10 commandments, and then we've got the 612 or 13 or whatever it is, oral traditions or traditions of the elders in the Old Testament. And then we've got over 1,000 commandments in the New Testament that we're confronted with. So we talked about that, and just kind of reviewed that we rebel against all of that, but at the same time we take comfort in it. We also tend to want to dilute some of those commandments, and I'll talk about that in a minute a little more, but to try to find a something that we're comfortable with. So we might go from church to church because each one is going to have their own written and unwritten laws, mostly unwritten laws, or assumptions. And, our own interpretation of that, which Paul refers to as a letter of the law, we're going to go from church to church to find somewhere where we're comfortable, i.e. a law system that we think we can keep, right? That we can be successful in and be accepted in, and obviously that, God does not grade on the curve. So that whole notion is a fallacy, but yet we do it anyway. So let me go on to verse 2, and I'm moving quickly. This is all review for you guys, but some of the folks listening out there may be hearing some of this for the first time. So verse 2, it says, for a woman who hath a husband is bound by the law to her husband, as long as he liveth. But if the husband be dead, she is loosed from the law of her husband. So then, while her husband liveth, she be married to another man, she be called an adulteress. But if her husband be dead, she is free from the law, so that she is no adulteress, though she be married to another man. So that goes back to one of the original 10 commandments, which really, you can't really dilute that one. It is what it is. So that immediately causes dread to a lot of people who are divorced or who remarried. And I addressed that a little bit, but first, the point that Paul was making is that he was speaking to an audience that knew this commandment very well. Even though it was written to the Romans, he primarily, his method was anytime he went to a new city, he would go to the synagogue first because he'd have an audience in the synagogue, and he was, his knowledge of the scriptures, the Old Testament, were beyond compare, at least according to his own testimony. So he could speak with authority. So he would always go to the Jewish community first, and they understood this. That this was, so he's really using it as a good example from, say, look, if the man dies, all of you are fully, that she's free to remarry, and that in that way he was able to segue into this verse 4, which I think is one of those verses we ought to try to commit to memory, at least in concept, just like Romans 6:11, where we count on the fact we're dead to sin. Well, here basically we're going to count on the fact that we're dead to the law. But getting back to, well, let me go a little further. He says, wherefore, my brethren, this is verse 4 now, ye are also dead to the law by the body of Christ, that ye should be married to another, even to him who was raised from the dead. So we know there's no question about who he's talking about, Christ, that we should bring forth fruit unto God. So I went back to this subject of divorce, and some denominations are, they'll preach that God hates divorce and divorce is not permissible. I have a doctor who I've become friends with. I went saw him today. He's my back doctor, and he was telling me, he says, I got a divorce a long time ago, and I finally decided to remarry, but I had to get an annulment, and it cost me $100,000 to get annulled, so that he was free to marry again. So you can see the corruption with that church that he attends. But the answer to that is, in a way, hey, wait a minute. If verse 4 is true, then we're dead to the law. Well, if we're dead to the law, then the law of adultery does not apply. There's no law against divorce to those who are dead to the law. Just like dead men can't sin, dead men are not bound by the law. And God did that to free us up so that we could be joined in another marriage to Christ. You know, and I went on to talk about how the church is the bride of Christ. And we, during the communion ceremony, we made reference to that. You know, that's when we take the bread, that's part of what we're remembering, is that we're the bride of Christ. So I suggested, you know, verse 4 should be one of those, you know, and I'm not into memorizing verses, but I'm into memorizing the concept, because you may read it in the NIV or one of the other translations, and it'll be stated a little differently, but the concept, the meaning is the same. So then verses 5 and 6, I went on to say, when we were in the flesh, past tense, the motions of sin, which I equated to the motivations of sin, I'll be worthy if, which were by the law. So the law gave us a measuring stick by which we could say, I'll be worthy if, and we could measure ourselves and others. I'll be, you know, so the motions of sin, which were by the law, did work in our members to bring forth fruit unto death. But now we are delivered from the law, that being dead in which we were held, that we should serve in the newness of the Spirit and not in the oldness of the letter. So I went back and said again, you know, the reason that we can be dead to the law and still avoid chaos or anarchy is because we're in the Spirit. And if we conducted our lives the same way Jesus did, you know, by his own testimony, he said, I don't do anything that the Father doesn't tell me to say or do. Well, if we were operating that way, then there'd be no need for law. Okay? Because we got something better. You know, we don't need somebody to translate the letter of the law for us. We've really, as Jesus said, I am the law of Moses. I am the law of Moses. I'm the fulfillment of that law. You know, and we've got him 24/7 if we'll just listen to him, you know, obviously. And, you know, and that's where we struggle, and that's where we're going to get into Paul's struggles, you know, as we go further into Romans chapter 7. So one other thing I'd mention too is, I think it's an interesting thing to think about, and I believe it to be true, is that, you know, we talked about that measuring stick, you know, that we use the law to measure ourselves, you know, both for ourselves and against others. So very often there are people who seem to think that they measure a little higher than we do, and they're self-righteous, and, you know, and in other words, they're going to put us down to build themselves up or build themselves up at our expense, and they're going to use the law to do it, right? So we call them self-righteous, and it hurts when that happens to you, when you're the victim of that. But there's also others that use the law as a measuring stick, and their conclusion is that I am no good, I am worthless, right? You know, I'm a loser. Well, that person is just as self-righteous as the other one. Well, how can that be? It's because they're measuring themselves by the law and not believing what God has said is true about them. So that's the two sides of self-righteousness. And I think that's important to consider, you know, in that. And a lot of people, you know, have never thought of that. You know, that the guy that just thinks he's worthless is just as self-righteous as the guy that thinks he's better than everybody else. You know, and really, truly, both of them are just, they're equally difficult to relate to, just in different ways. You know, so anyways, that's a start.
I think in both, is my sound cleared up yet?
We can understand you.
Maybe I'm not sitting close enough. Anyway, I think in both of those cases, Tom, it comes back to the ego again. You know, I mean, sometimes our ego is falsely pumped up. Sometimes our ego is falsely torn down. But either one is false.
Mm-hmm.
And I learned something from Jonathan Bean a long time ago in some parenting classes. And it was, when your kid comes home late, and that's it, you're 5 minutes late, you're grounded 5 days. They're going to rebel against that, and they'll be 10 minutes late next time.
Mm-hmm.
But if you say to the child, well, what do you think's fair? You were supposed to be here at 10. You got here 5 after. What do you think is a good punishment? And they'll be harder on themselves because we're all harder on ourselves than you would. And they'll say, well, I don't know, 5 weeks grounded. And you go, well, that's a bit much. Let's just go 2 nights. And then you look like the good guy to the child. And you're actually showing them mercy in their eyes. And it worked. I mean, it worked in my situation. And even a little bit beyond that, somebody told me, why is it we came to God? It was because he sets us free. He doesn't put us in bondage.
Mm-hmm.
And when my stepdaughter at the time came home for the summer, I was freaking out. And somebody told me, set her free. Let her be the adult she's called to be, but also let her know that her consequences will be hers. And it changed everything. Changed the game. My stress was gone, her stress was gone, and it's like, well, aren't you afraid she's going to go do all this crazy stuff? I said, well, that's for her to decide. And then she'll have her consequences. And that's kind of where we are. It's not that we don't, have mistakes, but the payment we have is our own consequences due to our own self-imposed laws that we tend to break. And then we go, can't believe I did it again. But that's the lesson, isn't it?
Yeah. And yeah, we're going to get into that. I can't believe I did it again pretty soon here in this chapter.
Yeah.
As you well know. Yeah.
When I do Alpha class, I talk about the law, and I think we could probably do it for everybody at home. It's important for the rest of this broadcast here to not look at Martin on the top center. Just do not look at that square.
Right.
And you can
I did it.
what you want to do.
I did it again.
Right away.
Yeah.
That's how the rebellion of the law and the natural man works. It works every time.
I can't stop doing it now.
You evil, wicked person.
What a wretched man I am. I'm looking at Martin.
I said I was muted. Maybe I shouldn't say this, but I will. The tendency to moon you is unbelievable. Give you something to look at.
You crack me up.
Well, as long as nobody's looking, they won't be offended.
Yeah.
Oh, there'll be some people that'll be offended.
Wow.
Absolutely.
That would show you have a split personality.
You're cracking me up, Jim.
And he may be a crackpot.
I think. Are you done, Dave? I'll
Yes, sir. Go right ahead.
I think. I mean, it's brilliant that we're able to laugh, but when you're under this law, I mean, let's face it, in the flesh, we're under the law all the time. Everybody sitting here watching has got an agenda in the flesh. It just hasn't been revealed yet. I mean, that's glory to glory, right? Letting go of the rules and the regulations that we've used our whole lives to save ourselves. And honestly, half of them we don't even realize they're there. That's the thing with me. It's like it's a reoccurring event because what I now can see as a dependence apart from God. I didn't even know it was there. We can say it goes all the way back to the needs, the personal needs. But like you were just saying, with your granddaughter, just going into kindergarten, she's learning a whole set of rules and regulations. And then the initial reaction is, I don't want to be here. I don't like this. But then as we get older and we mature, we become connoisseurs of the law. You know, we can pick and choose, and we know what we like and what we don't like, which in English means we know the laws we can meet and the ones that we definitely can't meet. So we kind of migrate to the easy ones, quote unquote. But they all lead to death. You know, they're all leading to personal, physical, relational, mental. The buzzword is mental health. You know, it's not rocket science. But I think when he's talking in the first part of Romans 7, he's saying he's talking to the brethren. So isn't that us? I mean, he's not going to call. He's saying you know the law. You know, so he's coming from a standpoint, whether you know it or not, you know the law. Now he's talking to a bunch of in a Jewish setting that was, you know, ruled by rules and regulations. And the thing that because I heard part of it on the recording, the thing that gets me about this is, I remember when I first got into this, the freedom freaked me out. It still does at times. The freedom that's available, there's no handrail. You know what I mean? There's no parameter. There's no training wheels, and I'm not used to that. I'm used to having training wheels. Mate, I can pull a wheelie on a training wheel like you wouldn't believe, but you take the training wheel off and I'm like 2 miles an hour. I'm not sure. So put that into real life, you know. How are you relationally? You know, maybe if me, Jim, Frank, if we all go out for lunch or we go out for a meeting, and we don't know anybody else in the room, there's a time in my life where I'd hide behind all of you, and as I'm hiding behind all of you, I'm scoping the room, and I'm seeing who's okay and who isn't okay. And what I mean by that is, who isn't going to reject me, who isn't going to judge me, who isn't going to fill in the blank,
Who's safe?
who's safe and who isn't. Great. Yep. Cut to the chase.
Yeah.
Because that was my kindergarten. I learned that in kindergarten, just like your granddaughter. And the people that weren't safe, I stayed away from, and the people that were safe, and I'm still doing that. I mean, I don't care as much anymore because I know who I am. But if there's behaviors and tendencies in other people that freak me out because they're reminders of the past. They're, you know, that person, they weren't good, and here he is in 2025 sitting in front of me. And that's why it's so important to hang on to the fact that we're not just free of the law, we're dead to it. If it's going to come back to life, it's because we're doing it, because we're feeling insecure and insignificant. I don't want to say any more right now, but that's what was hitting me with the little bit that I heard and what you were just saying. And I honestly don't think that the whole woman married to a husband or divorcing, you know, she can't leave him, she's called an adulteress unless the husband died. I don't honestly think it's talking about divorce. I think it's a deeper context, because if that's all you focus on, you miss the whole point of our relationship with Jesus. Again, if the goal in your denomination is to not have anybody in there who's divorced, well, then of course you're gonna weasel and manipulate that scripture. But I think because he's talking to Christians, so brethren, you know the law, don't you know? Here we go. He's just finished telling us we're dead to sin.
Yeah.
So, like you said, Tom, dead men can't sin. Dead men aren't under the law. So what is the whole point in using that whole analogy of a husband and a wife? Because it's about a relationship. It's about us being the bride of Christ. It's about all these laws that we've depended on being crucified with him, so that we don't lean on our own understanding, but we think about a real marriage. Think about open, honest, and transparent. There's a certain amount of safety. I know that Cindy and I can be in a room full of people. It happened today. She's on one end and I'm on the other, and I can just look at her and know we're good. You know what I'm saying? Does that make? Because there's a relationship behind that. There's a experience. There's all this communication. So I think the whole marriage and divorce thing, or the woman and the man dying, I don't think it has anything to do with. I think it has more to do with the fact that how we were made set free, how we're legally set free from the flesh, and how we're legally set free from the law. That's just me thinking out loud.
I think I was trying to use it as a setup for verse 4, where he says you're free to be joined to another.
Right.
But I knew. Well, let me just be real honest. When I read that, I thought, you know what? There's going to be people out there that are going to say, well, where do we stand on divorce? Because divorce is so common, and I don't want people dragging a bunch of guilt baggage around with them for the rest of their life since they got divorced. And the reason I don't is because if they're dead to the law, then it does not matter. As far as being divorced, it doesn't matter. That's it's like sin. It's like you're dead to sin. It doesn't matter anymore. There's
right.
There's no reason to even focus on sin. The minute I think I mentioned that at the beginning, because we made the transition from 6 to 7. I said, okay, everybody, what if you could narrow it down to 3 words? What does Romans 6 say? Dead to sin, right? I mean, in 3 words. So why in the world should I get up there and focus on sin? Or sins, examples of sin or manifestations of sin. I can focus on sin only to state that it's unbelief, and everything else follows after that. If I focus on that, where's the focus on the gospel? Where's the focus on the union with Christ? It's not there. It's not there. So I think it does people a terrible disservice as believers. Now, as non-believers, if I was trying to evangelize and lead people to Christ, I would need to talk about that. But that's really, John Glenn always referred to Romans 6, 7, and 8. And I think you mentioned it briefly, Dave, as the gospel for believers. The gospel for believers, not the gospel for non-believers. That's mentioned elsewhere by Paul, but not here. So I guess I just had to be honest about it. Was bothering me that it might be bothering somebody else, so I had to address it.
I think Ron brought it up a while back, where him and John were somewhere, and somebody said to them, "Well, what what about the sin problem? You know, what about my sinning? And John was like, haven't you sinned enough already?
Mhm.
So anybody that, when you come to Romans 6 and 6, 7, and 8, you've already had enough. You know what I mean? You're done. You're at the, hopefully you're at the end of your rope
Yeah. You're ready for recovery.
and you're receptive,
Yeah.
you know, versus psychoanalyzing it and coming up with some rabbit trail or,
Mhm.
you know.
Mhm.
One of the things that I remember John saying is this wasn't a message about divorce. It was an example of the law. And one of the other analogies he gave was I'm going to pick on Ron. Say when Ron's done here tonight, he goes over to his neighbor and he decides he wants his Corvette, and he jumps in the Corvette and steals it. And the guy calls the police, and they chase him down the road, and he, in a high-speed chase, goes off the road through the barbed wire fence and into a ravine, and he's flat dead. The question becomes, when the police show up, are they going to read him his rights? Are they going to put the cuffs on him
Mhm.
and catch him in jail?
Yeah.
None of that will happen. Why? Because the law has no power over him. He's
Or the
dead.
dead person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dead to the law. It won't matter. They can read him his rights all they want to,
Mhm.
but they won't because he's dead.
You
And
know, I think
that was a different analogy. Yeah, I understand what you're saying, Tom, about people feeling this guilt. You guys know, maybe just 2 years ago, I completed a divorce after almost 25 years. It was difficult for me to come to that decision. I had people in their self-righteous mode spewing stuff on Facebook saying, God hates divorce. And it's like, dude,
Yeah.
keep this trash to yourself. You don't know what I've been living with. You don't know what I've done for the last 24 years to try and make it right.
Yeah.
And I had to make a decision or continue. And it was my decision, and I was free to make it. But I felt a heaviness because it didn't feel right until it felt right. And when it felt right, I prayed about it. I looked at the scriptures, and the divorce was only granted because of hardness of heart. Well, there was hard hearts there for sure. And I had to make a decision to move on or to let my heart turn into a complete block of snow.
Mhm.
So I'm okay if somebody wants to call and judge me for that, but it ain't God. And I'm not doing it to myself anymore. I'm not going to judge myself in
Yeah.
religious law. I'm going to move forward and stay in my walk with Christ.
Mhm.
Martin, I think you're onto something there with bringing us back to the relational reality of marriage, and Paul using this as an example of law. But if you look at the word adulteress, that's the feminine of an adulterer, and it can also mean apostate, that same word.
Really?
And looking at apostate, what it's talking about, if you look up the definition of that, which I did, in general, apostate more broadly, an apostate can be someone who deserts a cause, principle, or loyalty they once held. That took me right back to Adam. That's exactly what he did. He became an adulterer. He gave up what he held, God fulfilling his needs for him on a daily basis. And he was going to do it himself from then on. He turned to something else other than God. Now that's an apostate. And of course, religiously, politically, I mean, it can be used in different settings. But I think that Paul's using that to emphasize what Martin was talking about, and that is the law against the uh, relationship that we have with one another, which also takes me back to what I was thinking earlier about the law. I think it's a two-sided coin. We tend to jump on the law and say, "Oh, we got to get rid of it. We're free from it. Yay, 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 yay!" But that's just one side of it. The other side of it is that laws are there to protect you, and they protect us from one another. They're there to bring us to Christ. It's part of the all things that work together for them who love him. Now, the only reason we don't need the law as a new man, as a new creation, is because we have Christ's mind within us. And what is his mind? To love one another, not hate one another, not to bring harm to another, but to help them, to guide them. And that's what we do with our laws at home. You're talking about teaching your granddaughter and how she's learning. And she's rebelling against it. That's natural. You're absolutely right. But the laws are good. Don't go out in the street when a car is coming. That's a damn good thing. Okay? So that's where Paul's going with this, and he sums that up in the next section we haven't touched on yet, but he begins that next section in Romans 7:7. What shall we say then? Is the law sin? God forbid. Nay, I had not known sin but by the law, for I had not known lust except the law said, thou shalt not covet. He's getting to that point, and I think that's kind of the idea in opening it up with this marriage relationship, which is an ideal picture of our relationship to Christ. It is an ideal picture. I'm glad he did that. I see that. And turning away, becoming apostate to that relationship is what he's emphasizing here. And that is not going to help you. It's going to hurt you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's exactly what we're telling our children when we say don't run out in the street without looking.
Yeah.
Okay. So the law has a good side and a bad side. The trouble is that we tend to focus, because of the misuse of law, we tend to focus on all the negativity. But there is good things about it. Civil law, the law you learn in school, the law you learn with your peers. Why would you learn a law with your peers? So you can get along with them.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't kill each other. Now, gangs end up doing that, but they're not peers. Your peers are if you're in the same gang. But the laws are there, especially when you get into civil laws, that we don't walk down the street and kill each other all the time with car rage or whatever. And so it has a good thing. And we talked a little bit last week on how all this, the government has set it up. That's what he's talking about. These laws that the government sets up are intended to be. They can be misused. There's no doubt about that. But they are intended to be for the protection of each other, of society itself. So I think this all ties together with that. And I know that I'm kind of jumping ahead a little bit, hitting 7, Tom, and I apologize for that. But that's the basis for verse 7, I think, was made in the first 6 verses of this chapter.
Mm-hmm.
And if we don't understand that, then we might overlook or just kind of whiz right on past, thinking, oh yeah, the 10 Commandments are good, but nothing else is. And that's not necessarily so. The laws are there to protect us. They're there to keep us in a relationship. And as a new creation, who we are becoming, or who we have become in Christ, needs no law because we think just like him. Just like the one that gave the law, the Ten Commandments. We think just like him.
Mhm.
That's how we'll behave. So that's my input anyway into it.
Yeah, that's excellent, and we're going to be going into Rome the next set of verses here next week for sure. So strap on your seat.
I mean, it is good to understand that this isn't a come down on divorced people thing. I mean,
Right.
you use it like that, and you're misusing the law.
Yeah,
But if you
Yeah.
tell them that relationship is important to God, then they've got a choice,
hmm
and whatever they choose. I mean, in some instances, it's better for them to divorce than to kill each other.
betcha.
Yep.
Absolutely.
So,
Yeah, you keep that one command, you violate a whole bunch of other ones.
Oh yeah,
Oh, that you said in some instances.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I think that might be in all instances instead of the
Yeah.
divorce.
Yeah. Yeah. Who's up?
Go ahead, Bill.
I just want to tell you, Bill Sam told me that we were going to be talking about John 3:16 tonight. Yes.
What a setup.
Yeah.
Yeah. Boy, I set myself up for that one, didn't I? Yeah.
Pastor Bill Sam.
Yeah.
Mm,
So, for God so loved the world. No,
mm,
I find it interesting. The law is always interesting to me because, 35 years in law enforcement is a long time to put up with the law. But the one thing that I saw in 35 years of doing that, we said it 1,000 times, us cops saying it to one another. Man, it's the same ones over and over and over. They never learn.
mhm.
They just, what the heck? Why? I mean, and so you look at the law and you think, this ain't working. And it really didn't matter. In 35 years, the laws change I think it's every January and July, if I remember right. I've been out of it a while now, but now, I've been out of it 5 years now. So that means in those 5 years, the laws have changed 10 times. I don't give people advice anymore at all because I tell them, I don't know the law. I don't know what's changed, what happened. And I give them a phone number for the police department. Call them because I can't help them. I don't know the law at all. And I didn't know it. I'm not an attorney and never have been. But yet I lived this living that proved to me that the law didn't work.
Mm-hmm.
Man, that to me, and then I read this and it's like, if I'm dead to it, I mean, here's what I see. What I did in my life is my focus was on the law or my sin. When, as a believer, if I focused on my righteousness because he says I have it, then my focus is completely different. My focus for tomorrow is completely different. The truck may be broke down, the house may need a new roof, the barn may have, God forbid, burnt down. All kinds of bad things can happen, but it doesn't change who I am. Lightning strikes the wicked and the righteous. Bad things happen to the wicked and to the righteous. Bad things happen to everyone. Everyone, at some point, will do something stupid. Give me about 10 minutes and it probably will happen. But it don't take long. But that's because, and I'm going to say this because I really, listening to you guys, it hit me, and I actually wrote it down. Like I wrote down a lot of things that Ron says, but I wrote down what Martin says. Not just free to it, but we're dead to it. That's huge. That's a huge difference when you just sit and just chew on that a little bit. And I'm going to chew on that one for a while, because that just makes it all completely different. And I knew it, but it was different to hear it from someone else. Peggy says, oh boy, I haven't thought of that. Self-righteous because I know I'm a sinner, forgiven but not forgotten. See, I think it's kind of odd that I'm divorced twice, so I guess I'm a double sinner. And I look back at those marriages and I don't remember any good things. I remember the bad things. I remember the arguments, remember the horrible things that went on, but I don't remember the good things. And I know there were good things in those marriages. I mean, with one, I had 2 kids who I loved dearly. So I know at least 2 good things came out of that marriage. And yet, why does my mind work that way? Because I look at the sin. I want to be, it's almost like those people that walk around with the whips and whip themselves, that this is what I deserve, boom, boom, boom. Well, that's not what God says. God says you're mine. I changed you. You're no longer that person. That person is dead. As far as when God looks at us, that person is dead. And being as I'm still living in this body, that's hard for me to recognize. It doesn't make it not true. It just makes it to where it's hard for me to recognize. That's all. And, when you go through things in life and somebody else does something, that doesn't necessarily make you the sinner. You may be a part of that because of marriage or because they're your kids or whatever. But I mean, I had one kid that was a drug addict. She's not anymore. But the fact is, was that my fault? Did I make her smoke it, drink it, whatever they do, shoot it up, whatever? I don't know what all she did. I don't want to get into it. What I care about is the fact that she's free now. She's recognized that she's free and that there's power in that. And she is now living the life of Christ. And she's free from all of that because of what he did. And that's what she chooses to believe. And I have to look at it that way. What am I choosing to believe? Martin says it all the time. What do you want? What do I want? So if I choose to go after the sin side and remember all my sin, then that's how I'm going to live. As a man thinks in his heart, so is he. This right here says, I'm free from that law. Do I believe it? That's it.
Good, Bill.
Enough said.
Yeah. Excellent. Excellent. You're preaching next Sunday.
Gotcha.
On John 3:16.
Yeah.
How did you know?
I got ESPN.
Yeah. Good. Good.
that whole thing about marriage and divorce, I think, is so deep that we can't remember who said it. Jesus said it, I think. It says, "What God hath joined together, let no man put asunder."
Yeah.
Mhm.
So that's the importance of that relationship, imaging our relationship with Christ. But if it's not being done in a relationship,
Yeah.
divorce is the answer.
Mhm.
And I think that's the deciding difference. But those are individual beliefs and thoughts that the two individuals have to have. I can't judge them. I can't tell them who's right and who's wrong. And even want to do that is about the stupidest thing I could do.
Yeah.
Uh, so, but that's the point of it. I think is that it does that marriage relationship does do that when God brings them together. But people get together that God didn't bring them together,
Mhm.
and who knows what that is? That's for the individuals there to determine,
Right.
not me.
Well, I'll tell you, in my case, in my wife's case, and the other side of that coin is we thought for at least 10 years, probably more, 15 of our marriage, that we thought it was our idea. It never occurred to us that it was God's idea. And when we started believing that, it saved our marriage. So
Amen.
there's two sides of that. You know what I'm saying? You know, I thought, well, yeah, if it was my idea, then I got the right to do away with it. And if she agrees, then what's the big deal? You know, and that's, of course, there was a lot more pain and suffering than just that. But I mean, that's what I finally came to, that the Lord put this together. You know, we thought it was us. Duh.
Yeah.
But on the other side of it, there's a lot of people that know the Lord. That's no. It was their idea. You know? And that's okay too. You know.
That's what John used to say all the time. He says, young couples, a lot of times they don't fall in love; they fall in heat.
That's right. Yeah, you know what we're thinking with. That's right.
Yeah,
Right.
and so that I think is one of the largest uh, reasons for the divorce rate as high as it is.
Mhm.
Is probably due to that. We're
Mhm.
thinking of our own gratifications, our own self, and what we can get out of that marriage from somebody else.
Right.
And we go into it that way. That's going to lead to death,
Yeah.
which is separation.
You go into it thinking you're in love, but you're not.
Well, when I asked Gail for a divorce, 89 and 1991, she looked at me and said, "No, we're going to church." And I said, "Oh, him."
Yeah.
I knew who I had to face.
Yeah.
But the big shocker was I was twice divorced before, and I had never had a woman turn me down for a divorce. That was always a quick way out for them. It was a safe way out from getting away from me. But that's the old me. And God gave Gail, literally, she's told people that God gave her a view of the man that he could make. And I'm nothing like I was then. And glad of it. So, I mean, this is, like you said, like you guys said, this is way deeper than just saying the words marriage and divorce. There's just so much more to it. And I'm probably remiss when I have a wedding to do. It's obviously it's by the leading of the Lord, but when I have a wedding to lead, or however you want to say it, I think we have some responsibility to talk to these people and you know, that statement alone, what God has put together, let no man tear asunder. Do you guys understand that? What does that mean to you? You know, to them, when you say it to them, and see what that means to them. Because it's easy to stand up there and just recite the words and sign the paper. That part's easy. And I mean, it's usually somebody you know anyhow. And but I mean, and those are just, they're not just words. This is taking two human beings, putting them together and they're making themselves one. That's the hard part. The words are easy. The hard part is what they have to do. And Gail and I had to do that. We were on our way out, and it, by the grace of God, we're married 36 years. So
St. Gail.
being free from the law, that's what we've recognized. I don't have to obey the law to stay with her. God put us together. What do you want me to do, God? Okay, end of story.
Frank, you want to go?
I was just going to say that, chapter 7, Paul clearly helps us understand what a Christian really is and how to go about it. The topic of marriage is, I'm glad we're talking about, because I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that were glad to hear some of the comments that were made, because it is a confusing chapter. And those who are married don't really know how to navigate around it. And as they go into the legal system and they go through divorce, all they're thinking about is, well, the law made me legally divorce this woman and take all my money so I can be free from her. And if you're saved, as I can only bring in my experience, but I was married and I had the faith, and I knew who I was when we got into that point where the marriage had to be dissolved. It took both of us. It took both of us to agree with it. I don't see any way that a marriage why you would want to be in that chaos. I don't think God wants us in the chaos and what damage it's going to do. But it is difficult to make that big step and to truly believe that this is God's direction. Now, I didn't really understand all of it. I just knew that we need to be apart because there was nothing good coming from the marriage. And the more we remained in it, the longer that I was becoming angry, bitter, hatred, and all that. As soon as it was done and settled, I began to have peace. But I would never, ever, that's why I think a lot of us really didn't like to get into marriage counseling. It's just not my place where I feel that I'm going to be able to help people get through this. It's a big thing to understand. And if you're not ready, if you're not in your heart, understand what's happening, it's going to be hard to navigate through this. Now, when it comes to the law, the way I can explain it, Bill, and you brought up being in law enforcement, I think I'm just here to appease the law, and just until it's time for me to go home. I'm not going to go outside the boundaries so much, but I'm just going to lead it like that. I have to follow the law. We all have to follow the law at some point, but I'm not stuck to it. I have to show up to work every day.
Yeah.
I have to, I have the choice to walk away from it, but as long as I'm working in that legal system, I have to show up. I have to be accountable. I'm expected to look and dress a certain way. If I'm outside that, the law will chastise me quickly.
Come in shorts and a wife beater shirt. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm glad we're talking about it. I'm sure some people that are at least listening have at least a better understanding of what we've grown and understood through this these chapters. But it's well said. That's it.
Talk about marriage. I went another direction. When I listened to the message, the first 3/4 of it, I couldn't hear. It was and but then it cleared up the last quarter of it, which was good. But I ended up, what it made me do was just read Romans 7, first 1 through 6 for myself. And as soon as I started reading, the Lord reminded me of John Glenn teaching us all when we first learned the Alpha series, and he was teaching us out of Romans 6, 7, and 8. He said, when you go into Romans 7, you got to bring your suitcase, carry Romans 6 with you. Remember that?
Mm-hmm.
And you got to carry 6 and 7 with you into 8.
8.
So that's
Like
the
the
first
step.
place I started, and the Lord reminded me, well, what was said in Romans 6? Well, to keep it short, the main theme was, like 6:11, count on the fact you're dead indeed to sin. So I started at 6:20, and I got the amplified version. So it's the first time I read it. I don't know why, out of all these years. Maybe I've read it and just didn't remember, but it helped me to understand it. It explains it in a little different wording, a little different way. Starting with 6:20, when you were slaves of sin, and we defined sin as unbelief, right? So when we were slaves of unbelief, you were free in regard to righteousness. And in parentheses, you had no desire to conform to God's will. I can relate to that because before I got saved, I didn't have a problem because I didn't care about anything, nothing, just me, myself, and I. And if there was a problem, I just used denial. Well, I ain't got a problem. You got a denial, projection, and rationalization. That's how I live. So verse 21, so what benefit did you get at that time from the things of which you are now ashamed? None. No benefit. For the outcome of those things is death. But now, verse 22, but now since you have been set free from sin, unbelief, and have become, in parentheses, willing slaves to God, and it reminded me of the difference between a servant and a bondservant. And the bondservant, that back in the day, they used to take him up against the doorpost and they would take an awl and they'd punch a hole in his ear. Everyone would know that he was a bondservant. Well, the definition of a bondservant is a servant that pleased his master so much, the master set him free. But the servant loved his master so much, he chose to stay anyway. So he stayed because he wanted to, not because he had to. Okay? Where the law would say you have to. Like
Right.
a slave never knew what the master was doing. There was no relationship there. You were just a slave. The bondservant is different. There's a relationship there. Became willing slaves to God, you have your benefit, resulting in sanctification, parentheses, being made holy and set apart for God's purpose. And the outcome of this is eternal life. Verse 23, for the wages of sin is death, but the free gift of God, parentheses, that is his remarkable, overwhelming gift of grace to believers, is eternal life in Christ Jesus our Lord. So then he starts in 7, or do you not know, brothers and sisters? And when I read that, it's like, because you don't know or because you have forgotten. It's pretty much is what he's saying. And a lot of us that know, we've forgotten, and a lot of us that don't know because we don't know. Or do you not know? It's not a put down. It's just to bring to our awareness. In parentheses, for I am speaking to those who know the law, that the law has jurisdiction to rule over a person as long as he lives. And then he goes into for the married woman as an example, okay, is bound and remains bound by law to her husband while he lives. But if her husband dies, she is released and exempt from the law concerning her husband. Verse 3, accordingly, she will be designated as an adulteress if she unites herself with another man while her husband is alive. But if her husband dies, she is free from the law regarding marriage, so that she is not an adulteress if she marries another man. Verse 4, therefore, since all that is true, my fellow believers, you too died to the law through the crucified body of Christ, so that you may belong to another, to him who was raised from the dead, in order that we may bear fruit to God. And when I read that, so that you may belong to another, the Lord reminded me of, I looked it up, it was in John chapter 1, verse 12. But as many as did receive and welcome him, he gave the right, the authority, and the privilege to become children of God. That is, to those who believe in, adhere to, trust in, and rely on his name. That's out of the Amplified. But you know that one. But to as many as received him, to him he gave the right to become. Okay. Well, now we have the willingness to hear God and follow him. We didn't have that before. Where was I? Verse 4. Verse 5. When we were living in the flesh, trapped by sin, trapped by unbelief, the sinful passions which were awakened by that which the law identifies as sin or unbelief, were at work in our body to bear fruit to death, for death, since the willingness to sin led to death and separation from God. Isn't that good the way it says that?
Mm-hmm.
But now we have been released from the law and its penalty. We have been released from the law and its penalty, having died through Christ to that by which we were held captive, so that we serve God in the newness of the Spirit and not in the oldness of the letter of the law. So Romans 6, we're dead to sin, we're dead to unbelief. And Romans 7, we're dead to the law, or we're dead to our interpretation, the letter. We're dead to our interpretation of what we think God requires or approves of or disapproves of. The mind of the flesh, pretty much. That's where I went with it. The main thing that hit me was, it's a privilege he gave us, and it's because we didn't choose him, he chose us. And that's, to me, that's where the blessing is. That's the gift. He gave me the faith to believe in the first place, and he gave me the right to become a child of God. that you may belong to another. So another thing John had said was, there's no middle ground here. We're either a slave to sin or we're a slave to righteousness. Nowhere are you going to be free from either and running your own show. There's no middle ground. There's no gray. It's black or white. Correct me if I'm wrong. But the point, what he's trying to, by using the analogy of the marriage and divorce being adulterous, he's trying to show the example of, like, if we go to Romans 6, what he did for us is he killed the old person. He killed when we were born into sin. We were living under unbelief. Correct me if I'm wrong, we were born spiritually dead. And then when the Lord chose us and saved us, I think, Dave, you used the word awakening. We've been awakened. We became our I don't know how to say it. Our spirit came to life. I think before then we were dead in trespasses and sins. We were dead in unbelief and the actions that, the sins, plural, are the actions done out of unbelief. So the root is unbelief. We were born into sin. We were born dead in trespasses and sins, right? But he has made alive. So I think we were all dead until the Lord saved us. He woke us up. But now it's so that we can be joined to another. We were joined to the unbelief. We were dead in sins and trespass. Now we're alive in Christ. There's nowhere are we ever going to be apart from one or the other and be in control of our own life. You're either one or the other. And now that we are saved, it's a done deal. We're never going to be alive again in the flesh. And that's the part that gets, it gets confusing, because when we screw up, we think that we're in the flesh again. And that's not what he's saying. We died once and for all. We're never going to be the old man again. That person's dead. Now, the leftover remnants is what you're going to get into verse 7 and on, about the struggles of the leftover remnants. And the Amplified is really good. It explains it really well. I won't get into it, but so the part that gets me is the fact that he gave us the right to become children of God. He chose us. We didn't choose him. And the struggles that we go through, the leftover remnants of the unbelief, that's the new man is living with the leftover remnants of the old man in this body. It's not up to us to do anything about that, because the new man that we are is willing. We have a willingness to do what is right. We agree with the law that it's good. Mm-hmm. And we delight in the inward man. Yet there's this war going on. Oh, wretched man that I am. Who will deliver me? Well, we are. The battle's been won, Ron said last week. The battle's already been won. It's the struggles that, I don't know. Remember, John used to say, if heaven is so much better, then why did God save us and leave us here? Why didn't he just take us home? Right?
Mm-hmm.
So why does he leave us here why did he make it to where we're left with the leftover remnants of the old man? And I think the answer to that is that if it wasn't for that, what do we need him for? I think it keeps us humble and dependent. Because, oh wretched man that I am, who's going to deliver me? We're the new man is a POW in this body with the leftover remnants of the old man. And then who's going to save me? You can't get yourself out of it. You can't do anything about it. It's just yuck. So that's where we become totally dependent. I'm desperately dependent on him. So that's all I got.
One thing that kind of came to my mind. Go ahead. Yeah.
One of the things that John had, I think it was even possibly the title to that section of the Alpha series, was identity crisis.
Mm-hmm.
Forgetting who you are and whose you are. You go to the old habits of the flesh. And then you, like you said, we rejoice and we enjoy after the inner man. And it gives us an awakening again. It's like, whoa, that mess is still here. And he began talking about walking in the light, seeing it for what it is. That's that nasty flesh again. And I can't do anything about it, but God help me with it.
Mm-hmm. The one thing I got out of that too is that you talked about we are dead to the letter of the law, or dead to our own interpretation of the letter of the law. So if that's the case, it doesn't matter how we interpret the letter of the law. We're dead to it. It doesn't matter. So why should we argue that? You know what I'm saying?
Because that interpretation came from the mind of the flesh.
Right.
Not the new man.
Right.
So it doesn't count anymore.
Right. But I
It's
mean,
irrelevant.
so many Christians get in these horrible arguments over the interpretation of the letter of the law. It doesn't matter how you interpret it if you're dead to it.
Oh, and you'll get the guys who have been to a real strong religious setting who says, well, we're called to rightly divide the law, and then we can use the law. And it's just like, dude, you missed the whole point.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I cut somebody off. Was it you, Martin?
No, mate. No, I'm as we're sitting here, I'm just listening to everybody, and the thought that's crossing my mind is the whole thing with that marriage and divorce and adulteress and all that stuff. I mean, I don't know. It's just I haven't thought about it. It's just he's talking about us and him. It's how he legally, like Jim said, how he legally owns us, slaves to righteousness. How he legally does that is we were married to our flesh. We were married to our conditioning. We were married to our save your own ass mentality with all the law and all the legalism and all the your interpretation of the law, like we were saying earlier. We get picky, denominationally, he's right, I'm wrong, I'm wrong, he's right. He's right, I'm wrong. And in order to pull us out of that, he killed us. Raised up a brand new creation. Because that's the only way it can be done. There's no such thing as behavior modification.
Right.
it's brilliant when you think about it.
Mm.
I mean,
Because it was enmity and it couldn't be reconciled.
Right.
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 So then the next question is, what do we have to deal with? Well then, why are we spinning? Why are we having such a hard time believing this? Because of the lies that are attached to the law, the lies that were put in place. So we applied the law to ourselves. I'm not okay. Well, I need this in order to be okay. Solomon syndrome.
Yeah.
If we don't deal with the lie, it still has the power because it's the truth that sets us free. That's why we do a fifth step. That's why we do a fourth step over and over and over again. The whole onion skin thing. It's cool, man. Cool.
Yeah, and then we got to wait for him. It's not up to us to stir the shit up.
No.
He's the one that brings it up in his time and in his way, wherever we are. He gets me a lot of times in Publix.
Yeah.
He'll be doing Theophostic on me, and I'll just break down crying in the middle of the aisle. And I'm dealing with some of those lies that you're remembering some of the stuff where you were told you were worthless and you're never going to amount to anything. And he's saying, it's not true. I love you and I'm with you. And he shows you your whole life flashes before your eyes in a split second. And he shows you how far you've come, how far he's brought you.
Mm-hmm.
He reveals himself. You get to see who he is, 100% love, with no condemnation whatsoever, ever. And then he gets to reveal who he's made you to be for you to see. And it's all what he's done for us. We can't do for ourselves. All we have is a want to.
That's right.
That's the only requirement for recovery is a willingness to change. And in the moment that he gives us faith to believe, we have the willingness.
Mm.
It's always there. I was reading I think it was in Matthew somewhere, and it was talking about the different grounds, the stony ground and the one, different ones that sprung up real quick but didn't have any root and all that. I've been every one of those until finally there was fertile ground for me to grow. I've been every one of them. And I used to look at that and say, yeah, that's so-and-so. Yep, that's so-and-so. And no, that they're all me. Been there, done that. And look how far I've come because of what he's doing in me. See, that's the beauty of it.
We can now say they were all me, because they aren't all me now.
Right.
I'm brand new.
We're all in a transformation process. Our mind is being renewed.
Yep.
Until the day Jesus comes to get us, we're going to be on step 2. We're still coming to believe. Still coming to believe. I don't care how many years you've got in it, you're still coming to believe. Right? So we're being transformed by the renewing of our mind, and that we may prove what is that good and perfect will of God. We're all being conformed to the image of Christ. That's him causing that to happen in us from the inside out. It's a result of him being in us. And the problem is we try to help. We try to do, it's like the Solomon syndrome. How many years I tried to perfect it. I'm going to figure out how to stay in the upper half and always be believing and never go down there. So then my new false assumption was I'll be worthy if I never have another flesh flash.
Yeah.
See? So even that became a law. Even the Alpha series became a law.
Sure.
So, right. It's we got to get back to him doing for us what we can't do for ourselves. And the fact that we want to change and we're looking for him, that's good enough. Stop right there.
Mm-hmm.
You know? He's doing it, and he's going to continue to do it. We're good. There's nothing wrong. There's not a problem. Thinking that there's a problem, that's the problem. There's not a problem. We're good.
So would you agree that wherever you are right now is exactly where God wants you?
Yes.
Right. Isn't that
Yes.
cool? And
Yes.
even no matter what you're going through right now, God is aware, God is with you, and you're right where He wants you to be. And it might be a really hard lesson you're going through, but that's God's work. You have struggles. Listening to Richard Rohr a lot, like I said before, I just read this book called The Four Agreements. And when we talk about the law and the things that we begin to understand, we like Tom and Martin and we all said, you pick these things that, okay, well, I can agree with that. So that's how I'm going to live. And those people over there are different. I disagree with that. And you start living by these agreements that you made all your life, and they're all false. And then it leads to dualistic thinking, which is black, white, wrong, right, good, bad. And that's when you find yourself in the dualistic thinking is when you realize, wait a minute, I'm not trusting God. I want to live in a unity thinking that each one of us belongs to this body of Christ, and there's love between us. There's a different strength, a different intensity of love for each individual as you get to know people in relationships, but love is what wins. Dualistic thinking, finding fault, judging ourselves included. We judge ourselves, we judge others. We're afraid of other people judging us, and we're so worried about what people think about us because we forget how worried they are about what other people are thinking about them. They're not even interested in us. God's interested in us.
Yeah.
And what sets us free is, hey, I'm going to live according to God no matter what anybody thinks. I know I'm doing what God's calling me to. And if I'm struggling, then that's for me to try and figure out. Introspection, I think, is key to our growth. Looking at ourselves and going, where did those ideas come from? What am I believing now, really, about myself? And John Glenn has been a huge, huge influence in teaching me that, to live in the moment. The future has problems of its own. The past is gone. Live right now as being led. And it's quite vain.
Yeah, Dave, you said a couple weeks ago, people come to the door and they say, you ask them, what do you believe? And they say, well, we believe. You go, no, not we. What do you believe?
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
It's an important question for you to figure out, for each one of us to figure out. What do I really believe about this?
Right.
This Jesus thing, this God thing, this faith thing.
That puts the focus back on you working your program and forget about other people, what they might think, say, or be doing.
But if you know what you believe, and you believe that you're a child of God, and you are dead to sin, and you are dead to the law, and you are alive because of Christ, that's helps you to be reminded of what is this life really about.
Yeah.
We talk about recovery a lot because a lot of us have been in recovery, but this is what we recover from, the flesh. There's recovery of all sorts of other things, but we need to recover from this, like you said, the remnants of the flesh that want to tell us what's right and wrong, what's good and bad, and we can save ourselves. And we can't.
Right. I said to the Lord one time, how come it's so hard and how come it's so difficult to just believe? And He said to me, you're going to need help with that.
Yeah.
So that's why He gave us the Holy Spirit, to help us believe. Because without that, we're done.
Mm-hmm.
By yourself and
right here are helping somebody.
On our own ability, we can't get the job done. I have a want to, but I can't make it happen. He's got to make it happen.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Hello.
Well, I know.
Anybody else?
Good discussion tonight, man. All you
Yeah.
guys, good discussion. Yeah.
8:30.
Yep.
John 3:16. It was wonderful.
It sure was.
Yeah, we better get out of here because the law said
Okay.
we're done dates there.
I'll go down the list. Kelly Odom, Bob Stafford, Gail Somm, Sandy Glenn, Patrick Zent, Peggy Martins, Chuck Warren, Michelle McMillan, Dar Bod, Candy Rivera, and Barbara Kelly.
Well,
Thank you guys for all being here. Thank you for those that aren't on the list. We hope you got something out of this. We did. We hope you did. Mark?
Same bat time, same bat channel. Have a great week. Fasten
All
your
right.
seatbelts.
right.
See you next week.
All right.